I am talking to Sarah Bierstock, an actress, playwright, and producer based in New York City. Welcome to our podcast on pay equity in theater.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you.
We have a bunch of gnarly questions, and I'm going to delve right in.
So,
So, looking at it in a kind of historical context, we are seeing more plays written by women and starring women in big roles. You have been in this business for a while. Would you say that more roles for women and alternative ethnicities um, are becoming available in the New York theater industry?
I would say definitely. I would say that has been in process for at least 5 years, but certainly post-pandemic, there's been a tremendous increase in opportunities for people of color, people of just any voices that we weren't hearing before. So that does include women, because there were a lot less women being produced and a lot less playwrights being produced. And I think unilaterally the casting has gotten significantly more inclusive. And that really did start before the pandemic, but it definitely changed drastically after.
Well, that sounds like good news.
I think it is good news, yeah.
And
long overdue.
So, interestingly, you've had a certain career shift from being on stage to writing plays and producing short films. When and why did you start to write plays?
I started writing plays in 2014, and it was absolutely not an intentional process. It happened because I became completely fixated by a real life story, which was all over the news, about an honor killing that had happened in Pakistan. And I had one of those moments where I couldn't shake what I was reading. And this story broke on the news, and I just couldn't tear myself from it. I felt like usually we read things or we hear things, and it goes in one ear and out the other. And for whatever reason, this particular story, where this woman had been standing on the steps of a courthouse with her husband, and in broad daylight, like 8:30 in the morning, and she was stoned to death by her family in front of many people that were entering the courthouse. And something about it did not separate myself from it. I really got affected by it. And that history of sort of spending time with that story, and then finding out later that, in fact, the husband, who was bereft by his wife's loss, had in turn actually admitted to killing his previous wife in order to be with this wife. When I learned about all of that, I just became so I had so many feelings inside of me and so many thoughts inside of me that I just started writing. And without the intention of writing a play, without any agenda about what I was writing, I just started writing. And that piece eventually turned into my first play over many, many, many iterations and years. And I think the reason it came out in the form of a play was simply because my whole life has been spent in the theater. So it's just a really natural creative outlet for me. But the shift into writing did not come from any larger intention of saying, well, I've always wanted to explore playwriting, or I think I can do this, or let me try my hand at it. It was just simply that I was completely moved and overcome by something that had happened in the world, and that was the outlet that it came out in me. And then that changed because that play kind of took over my life for a few years. I worked on it and edited it and researched and developed it for many years. And once I realized that it had a life, I realized I had other things I wanted to say and explore in playwriting. And so that became more expansive over time.
When you were developing your play Honor Killing, did you find it easy to score opportunities to develop the play, to organize readings with actors, to get it into the circuit of play development?
Easy is a very relative term. I mean, I think the answer is no. However, that particular piece, people were really invested in the importance of what we were talking about and what the play explored, which was misogyny and violence against women, and it touches on a gang rape in the United States. It touches on pointing a finger at other in terms of other cultures. And so I think it was very much on the pulse of what everybody kind of wanted to talk about at that particular moment. And journalism, it was before Trump ran the first time. And so I found that people were very, I mean, by people, I mean actors, were very willing to donate their time to come do table reads, and that they were interested because they could tell that I was trying to learn myself. I wasn't being didactic about knowing things that I didn't know. And so there was like a natural exchange that people, I think, were interested in being a part of. But in terms of support outside of, you know, actor friends volunteering to do readings, it's very challenging to get financially get any development or opportunity as a first-time playwright, which I certainly was. I came into that with zero experience to show to date. And so, you know, when you have people all over the world and country and New York City, especially with a canon of work and MFAs and, you know, are just incredibly experienced, there's very few opportunities, and certainly they're going to go to those people over a first-time playwright exploring the first play. So,
statistically, we've been investigating the fact that while there are numerous successful Broadway shows written by women in our current time, all over the US, not enough plays by women make the stage. That there are certain gender biased walls against emerging women playwrights to even get a first opportunity to show and develop their work. This is a very diffuse experience. I didn't get into this program because I'm a woman playwright. It's not something we can ever evidence. Did you have any experiences or insights at all that being a woman playwright made a difference as opposed to being a male playwright presenting their first play?
I would say that where I felt that in some ways is critical, in that I happen to be writing plays at a time where the country and the world have decided it's incredibly important that other voices are being elevated. So I'm a white woman, and a lot of times people have told me very definitively they were interested in elevating people's voices of color right now, and therefore that they were not pursuing developing pieces by women who are not of color at the moment. Now, that's really complicated, and I actually think that that's a pendulum swing that needs to happen. And so that has been told to me. I've also experienced it because my last name is Bierstock, so there's an assumption also that I'm Jewish. I've also been told that very clearly that, you know, what's different about playwriting is that the theater or the artistic director or whoever's producing the opportunity is in many ways elevating the person's voice. It's not so much about the play as it is about that you're choosing a playwright to elevate their voice. And that's very different than casting. So I think there's an intentionality about which voices are being elevated, and there should be, but there's always going to be discrepancy when that happens because, you know, historically it's been white men. So there's going to be a shift when we're trying to elevate other voices. And I'm somewhere kind of in between that because I am a woman, but I'm a white woman. And so with a Jewish last name. And I think that there is a conversation that's happening internally in theaters, as it should, about which voices are being elevated. And so from my perspective, that often won't be me. And I have been told as such. And I think that's, it's challenging, but it's also appropriate and necessary.
I hear what you're saying. And to tie it back into the pay equity question, because the voices we elevate are also the voices we're going to get paid.
Sure.
Do you feel that the royalty system actually is advantageous for women playwrights because the play makes what it makes, and that's your paycheck, and it's not as bound up with hiring decisions and offering women less pay that we're experiencing in other areas of work?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. It's, usually depending on the relationship to the theater or how the play is running or what the opportunity is, usually you're given an advance and then you make basically generally a percentage of the box office. So, and then once that play is running, or let's say, hopefully you have, several plays running, you're getting that consistent check based on, the ticket sales. So it does definitely even out any questions about what you might make. That's for sure.
Forgive my ignorance. Do you think there could be latent discrimination in terms of some theaters might offer women playwrights a lower percentage? Could that be a thing?
I think that's entirely possible. I think that that's something that's negotiated between the playwright and the agent, and the playwright's agent and the theater. There are sort of standard rates, but I'm sure that if the person's famous or if the theater, they might try to navigate or negotiate what that rate is. Absolutely.
Talking about unions, in New York City, more unionized theater work is available than in most other US cities. Would you say that union membership as an actress has provided you with more equitable pay than you might have otherwise experienced?
Definitely. Absolutely. Because theater by nature is so time consuming, and especially when you get down to things like tech week and 12-hour days and the breaks that you're required. When it's not unionized, it is so easy and sometimes it feels essential to take advantage of people's time and not function within what's appropriate for an actor to be compensated. So when you become unionized, when you become part of the union, you get paid for all of those things. So if you were to go over the time frame that's been allotted, or if you crept into lunchtime, or all of the things which happen when there's no regulatory factors, are all compensated as a union member.
How interesting. So there's time equity too. What are you doing with my time? Am I getting recompensed for extra hours?
Yes.
And so on. So
yes.
Would you say that, do you feel that actors' unions are a strong pay equity tool in the arts?
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
New York City is also one of the places in the US where childcare is least affordable. How do you keep your artistic career ticking while choosing to be a stay-at-home parent for your daughters?
I don't have an answer because it's so phenomenally difficult that I think every day is just a juggle. There are organizations that are in place and are soliciting more funding so they can be more helpful to women with children in this industry, and I should say parents in general. There's an organization called PAL, and again, these are organizations that raise money to help pay if a woman or a man is in a show and they need help with childcare, they can help subsidize some of that, but it is few and far between. There's also like Broadway babysitters, things like that are organizations that are sort of aligned with supporting artists. But it's I think if you don't have family here, or you don't have an immediate community of network of people that can help you with your children, it's close to impossible.
I am hearing that. Would you say that those difficulties in terms of going to auditions, booking a show, being gone nights for being on stage is something that drives theater workers like you more towards the playwriting and production end of the theater world and away from actually being on stage?
Absolutely. 200%. If I decided tomorrow that I wanted to even be in the running for an audition in 10 days, I would have to spend probably thousands of dollars just to be able to prepare the way I need to prepare for the audition, never mind getting to the audition and getting my children where they need to be that particular day, and or God forbid I have a callback or a second callback, or that I get the show. It's thousands and thousands of dollars.
So ultimately in the world of theater, the stage privileges childless individuals. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, I don't choose to word it like that because that feels so difficult, but I think that that's true.
What makes you most angry or frustrated about working in theater?
excuse me, I think that it can be very difficult that it feels like the same actors work all the time when there's so very many profoundly talented people. That's really hard, but I have a business understanding of why that is, and it sort of swings back to where this conversation started around producers need the show to run to make money. And if you have a known face, it is more likely that people will come see your shows. So it's tricky because you have, however many thousands of people all vying for the same roles. And if you're thinking about it from a producing perspective, well, you know that if, X person who just did 5 shows that the Broadway community already knows is in your show, they're going to have the face recognition to say, oh, we just saw her in this. Let's go see her in that. And
Right.
It's challenging that it really does feel like a couple hundred people who continue to get the same opportunities over and over again. That is not new. That is not new at all. But it's hard. It's hard to break into that.
I hear you. And in terms of pay equity, there's kind of a clustering of pay opportunities for the people who are already in.
That's true. Yes.
And that makes it hard to become a more diverse scene.
Absolutely. Or you end up taking something that's very little pay, next to nothing, so that you have exposure, so that you can then get the higher paying job. But if you do have children, think about the money you're spending to be able to do that next to nothing income job. It's a loss. It's a financial loss unilaterally, unless you are at that, that 1% of that little group that is working consistently.
What I'm hearing is that for women actresses in particular, this is a time in the world where gender bias mightn't be the biggest hurdle, but motherhood is.
If you're making me choose, I would definitely say motherhood is by far more of a challenge and bias than being a woman, though they are both challenging. Also, by nature, there are so many more actresses than men, than actors. There's also a numbers game of percentages as well.
And at this point in theater history, would you say there's roughly 50-50 actors being cast for male and female roles, more or less? Or are there actually also more male parts out there?
I think there's still significantly more male parts. I think that's shifting. Particularly as we elevate more women's voices, they are writing more women's roles. So I do think that is changing.
What would you love to see happen in U.S. theater regarding equity and pay equity in your lifetime?
I don't know how we would do it, but if we were, let's say, for instance, if everybody that was part of the union they took a small percentage out of our dues and put it towards some sort of support for people with children to be able to audition because it covered childcare. That would be just so ginormous in terms of expanding who is even available to be up for a role. As I said before, I rarely even look at what's happening because I know what's required for me to be competitive for it. And if something like that existed, I would definitely have my eye and my feet more in the game than I currently do.
Athena Project produced your first play, Honor Killing, in a hugely successful production in Denver. How was it possible to juggle the childcare challenge at the time?
I think that I was very pregnant. So I did not, when I came out there to see the show, I left one child with my husband and my other child was not born yet. So that was easier. That was easier because she was on the inside. And most of my involvement with that production was virtual because I live in New York City and you're in Denver. And so I was able to do that on Zoom calls and phone calls. And my child was also at an age where I think she was napping a lot. And we were able to do that in a less full-time capacity. I think if I had been in the same city, and sometimes when people produce your play, you're extremely involved, and sometimes when they produce your play, you're not involved at all. It depends on a lot of different factors. So my involvement in that was pretty limited, although very much loved and appreciated. And I would say it was mostly a question of finding virtual times that worked around all of our children's schedules.
So you have been drifting more into a behind the scenes writer producer role, and you have branched into short film production. Tell us what inspired you to begin with film work.
I've always loved film. I've been in front of the camera a number of times over the years, which I really enjoy. I'm not someone who sort of thinks about the lane very much. When you said, why did you start writing? I don't really think about, that's outside of the lane I know. I just create things, and sometimes they come out of me in different ways. And with film, I had in mind this series of 6 shorts, and I always tend to see things I sort of visualize them before I create them. And so for all 6 of those shorts, I had a visual in mind that I wanted to make manifest. And so, excuse me, so I did. I just, I really feel like I don't limit what I think I'm capable of in certain ways. And I just finished shooting the second of those shorts, which I'm so excited about.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's gonna be great. I'm just thrilled about how that whole process went, and really excited by what I've seen in the playback. And it was an incredible collaboration of almost exclusively women. I think there was one person on the set behind the scenes. I think there was 38 of us, and I think there was one man. And
I love that
not because we don't want to work with men, but because we just all wanted to work with the people that we had worked with before, who really were so talented and just reliable and smart, and they just happened to be a whole big group of women. So
wonderful.
I think I've drifted off the question. But
no, you have completely hit the bullseye, because this is one thing we've been finding out in our pay equity survey and in our conversations, that there is a natural social element to hiring. If a woman is in charge of producing and grafting talent, they're going to graft a lot of other amazing women that they know and have worked with. And in the past, it was men grafting a lot of men. And now it's wonderful to see people like you in the position to find the amazing women talent that's out there and getting them to work together. And the more we see women in the production role and in the hiring role, the more talented women who were previously simply overlooked and not in the room are going to be in those roles. So it's a really important aspect of pay equity. While short films are amazing tools to raise awareness and promote the talent behind them, they usually consume more funds than they attract, even if they end up winning festival prizes. What role does pay equity play in your role as producer and actress in the world of film? How does that work out in the world of finance?
Well, you're definitely right that they tend to not have an avenue to make money, for sure. So that's really challenging. I have found with this piece, so for both of my short films, I raised money. I had a benefit for one. I raised money with some crowdfunding for the first one. This time it was really important to me that I was not doing crowdfunding, and I approached organizations whose missions were aligned with what we were exploring in the film. And I found that for the most part, people were, if they were able to, the companies really wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to sponsor it. So I don't think in a way that I will end up making money on this film. But at the end of the day, I think I will have the film fully subsidized. And that means that I'm paying my own company back. I'm paying all of my crew members, all of the talent, all of, the 40 people on the call sheet. Everybody will make money eventually for their time, which is just the base to start with.
Yeah.
And then, at some point, it's always like work begets work. And it's important that people can see what you're capable of making so they can envision you doing other things that are perhaps more commercially viable or that they'll be willing to pay you good money for. But at this stage, I just am thrilled to have the support of the financial support of different organizations and producers who see the merit in exploring these ideas around women and gender. And that's why I feel like I was able to raise the money that I needed to film this.
So, how can our listeners support your project of putting women and women's issues into short films that really convey a message?
Well, I think we have to continue to see and put our money on the projects that are investigating those ideas. So whether it's seeing other, look, my film is not out yet, so I can't direct you to it. I will tell you when it's going to be out because I just wrapped. But if you put your money to support the theater and or the film that is exploring ideas that are empowering women and girls, then more commercial producers will find value in it because it becomes financially lucrative for them. So we have to put our money where our mouth is. If we're saying we want to support women and girls, then we need to look around and say, what artistically does that? And let's buy a ticket to that. Let's download that song and pay for it. Let's put our money behind the pieces that are already doing that, so that therefore the people that make the decisions around what gets made and who gets paid sees the value in it.
We can seize the power to create more equity in what we see in the arts by making those consumer choices.
Yeah. Yes.
What makes you hopeful in the world of theater today?
I mean, it is very exciting that so many new voices are being heard and seen. And I think that that's going to change the storytelling. It's going to change who is sitting in the audience because they'll be attracted to seeing something that they can relate to. And I think when the percentage of theater goers widens, then there's a collective shift in the conversations people are having. So that's kind of thrilling. You don't want an interesting conversation between 100,000 people. You want a really interesting conversation happening between 3 million people. So that access and that interest from a broader base is exciting. That's kind of inspiring. And I think on a smaller level, anytime there's a story that someone experiences that affects them personally, you can evoke change. And I mean, that's kind of the whole hope of art in general and theater in general, whether that's film or theater. So that happens, I find that really thrilling.
And that is the magic superpower of art. It can make stories go absolutely viral that weren't heard before and that deeply affect people. And suddenly you have a play about a young gay boy having a life experience that becomes everybody's favorite story. And it's our magic tool to put the stories of the marginalized and the overlooked center stage, right?
Yeah.
Let's make women's plays and films viral. That's our chance in history, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think it's going the right direction. Certainly compared to where it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I do think it is going in that direction. And I'd say more, please. Yes, but that it's certainly improving. Mm-hmm. And I think that's hopeful.
I have noticed that you have a number of children's and youth plays under your belt. Is playwriting for children's theater equitably paid?
I see. I would say it's the same as for any avenue of playwriting, because again, if the theater or producer is paying a playwright, they are either paying to have something commissioned, or they are saying, we've read through all of these plays and these are the stories we want to tell right now, and then we're going to establish a rate. So I'm only one person. I only know what I make, and I only know what the percentages are, or I'm not comparing that to somebody else because I don't have a relationship with what their internal rates are. But it's not going to be like, oh, if you're writing for adults versus children, that one is more necessarily equitable than the other. It's just the theater and what they might allot for who they bring on. and their relationship to that writer.
And have you found that writing children's plays is relatively lucrative within your basket of activities?
Yes, and probably some might say more so, because if you write something that is interesting to schools, there are so many schools across the country that in theory, as with most things, people tend to sort of gravitate to the same material, and then it goes sort of all across the country. Like suddenly everyone's doing, native gardens, or suddenly everyone's doing whatever the show is of the moment. So if there's a children's play that the schools really relate to and think is giving an important mission or experience to their children, you may find that suddenly there's 500 schools across the country that want to do your play. Now, if that's the case, you are certainly making a much higher royalty percentage than if only one theater was doing your play. Basically, what I'm trying to say is there's more schools than there are theaters. So if you can get your plays into schools and it starts circulating, you have the opportunity to make more money off of it.
So again, this is a great avenue for both ideas and creative work to become viral.
That being said, I will say that the Playwright is going to make a lot less money in a school, having a school play circulating, than in a theater, because the school cannot charge the prices that the theaters can charge, and your pay is directly related to the ticket price.
Of course. Yeah. Sarah, what is our next opportunity to see any of your work?
So speaking of children's theater, I have a play called Pandora's Suitcase, which is being produced by Syracuse Stage, and it actually opens on Thursday. It's in previews this Thursday, which is in a couple of days, and that will be running all within a 60-mile radius of Syracuse, New York, for about 3 months. That's starting this week. I'm very thrilled to see that. I probably will be going up there myself in a couple of weeks. And then the short film I just wrapped yesterday, which is called All the World is a Stage, is currently being edited, and it will premiere on BroadwayWorld.com on International Women's Day, which is March 8th of 2025.
We look forward to that massively. Obviously, it's a big day in the Athena calendar. Tell us about the short film. What is it about?
So, I love this film, and it has changed a lot since my initial iteration of it, but it's essentially a songstress. It's set in the 50s, and she's singing a song. In this particular case, she's singing the Gershwin song, It's Wonderful. And she takes the stage, and you're taking her in. She's sort of the perfect songstress. And she looks into the audience, and she doesn't see anyone, and so she's just singing it as one would perform appropriately in a cabaret. But the light comes on, and she sees a table of men. And she immediately changes her performance and her physicality to give them what she thinks they want. So she's the seductress, and they're ogling her, and she knows exactly how to make them feel good. And she's like, okay, I'm going to be this person for you. I'll perform in this way for you. I want your gaze. Your gaze wants me to look like this and act like this, and so I'll be this for you. Huh. But she looks to her right, and then suddenly the lights up, and there's a table of women. And the women really don't appreciate her physical behavior and how she's getting that attention, and they don't appreciate her at all. And so she's like, okay, they don't like me. I'm going to change for them. And so she suddenly, poof, there's a whole costume change, and she's in the 1950s. She's the perfect housewife. She's got the perfect. Her outfit is cinched at the waist, and she's got an oven mitt out, and she's all the things that they're like, oh yes, this is what we want. Now we can relate to you. And she turns back to the men, and the men say, yes, sorry, that's not really what we were looking for. And they just very graciously sort of leave. So here she is with the women, and they're pleased with her, and she's giving them what she thinks that they want. And she looks to her left, and there's a table of activists, and they're women and men, and they're like, yeah, that's not gonna do it for us at all. We're looking for some thought here, some rebellion to all these things that you are now aligning with. And so she she's okay. You know what? You're right. I don't want to be this. I want to be that. Let me give you what you're looking for. And poof, she changes again. And suddenly she's like Gloria Steinem, and she's strong, and she's passionate, and her costume has changed. And all of a sudden, the women over here, they leave. They don't support what she's doing anymore either. And then one more time, and she's with the activist, and she looks over and she sees a rabbi and a nun that are sitting in the audience. She's, oh my God, I should be chaste. I shouldn't be powerful. I shouldn't be sexualized. And so she changes again, trying to meet their expectations. And finally, each time she's spinning, she's just spinning and spinning and spinning and saying, I just can't be all these things for all these people. Like, I am all these things. Whose gaze matters? What's happening here? And finally, she comes out of the spin, and she takes a moment, and takes her power back. And she says, you know what? I'm enough as I am. I am myself. I don't need to be my own internal validation is what's important here. And she's in a very simple dress, and the lights come up, and she hears something. She looks up. She's like kind of asking who's there, and it's her daughter. It's her 7-year-old daughter who's looking at her. And she finishes the song with this sort of very simple, I am enough as I am, and that's what I want you to see, not me spinning for everybody else's needs. And it's very powerful. It makes me emotional to even talk about it, because it's sort of aligned with everything that we've been discussing for the last hour of like how you can, not be trying to meet all these myriad of expectations without support and find your own internal validation.
I am covered in goosebumps and in tears. And to tie back to what we said, what more powerful thing can mothers in theater do than to show their children how they are seizing the power, how they are deciding to be enough and to stick with what they want to put into the world and to keep doing it against all adversity. It's powerful for young girls to see their mothers fend with adversity and make their wins and value them. And most of all, how great it is for the young girls of our world to see their moms become not just the actress in the spotlight who is reacting to other people's cues, but also the producer, or the producer who chooses the director.
Yeah.
And
it's so important. It's so important, and it's so hard. It's really hard, but it's essential. It's like, I had someone in my life say to me recently, like, you need to, if you can, don't take for granted that these girls understand what you do. You need to show them, take them to set, take them to the theater, take them to a rehearsal, because they need to see you in all that you do, so they can learn. They can respect you. They can learn that they can do those things, and they need to see you be somewhere other than just mom, because otherwise they're not shown it. They don't know it, and they need to know all of you, so that it's mirrored for them. It's set up as a possibility for them to be more than they are just experiencing of me at home.
And how beautiful that we are allowed to be a generation who can model success in new roles that is unprecedented for a generation for whom hopefully this will become normalized.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Let's hope for the best. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing all these golden insights in a conversation that's not usually had, and for adding to our understanding of how pay equity and equity plays itself out in the world of theater. We're wishing you all the best of success with your coming productions and with your short film career. And we'll be watching your work, Sarah Bierstock.
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking me. It was so a pleasure to talk with you.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll have the pleasure again. Good luck with your day in the world of motherhood and theater.
Thank you. You too.
It's been a great pleasure.